big. So on several of the slides, I've mentioned mushrooms, and what mushrooms are what we call fruiting bodies. These are the reproductive structures of the fungus. This is actually the most visible part for most fungi because for most of them, they actually bring them up above ground. So most of them are going to be below ground with that mycelium, but they'll bring these fruiting bodies above ground because they're going to produce spores that will get blown around by the wind. And so if you've ever seen these guys in the grocery store, or if you've had them on your pizza, the spores are in that little section that has like the gills, the little rippled part. And so when these guys would reproduce, they'd open up and let those spores go. You may have come across big ones of these. These are called puffballs. They do grow in our forests here in Ohio. You also may have come across smaller ones up on trees. These do the same thing. When they're ready, they puff, meaning that they open up in an area and they puff out the spores so they can get blown around. Some of you may have kicked one. And if you've done that, you've actually wasted that fungus's entire reproductive cycle because if you kick one before it has puffed, that means that the spores weren't ready and that is going to be wasted for that fungus. The other one that's up here, all of these generally are edible. Now, I do not recommend that you eat anything that you go out and find in the wild. Because many fruiting bodies are actually toxic. The saying is everything is edible once. So there are actually ones out there, not necessarily of this kind of mushroom, but there are some mushrooms that look very similar to each other. One is perfectly edible, the other one is highly toxic. And the big reason for that is the toxicity is so that they won't get eaten before they're able to reproduce. The other one that's here, this one is an edible one. It looks weird. It looks like weird kind of potatoes. And that is because this is a fruiting body that's actually found below ground. These are truffles. And if you've heard of truffle oil or truffles, not the candy, but the fungus, these guys are incredibly expensive. And that is because they are found underground. They don't fruit above ground, which means that you need a special animal to find them. Specifically, you need a truffle hunting pig. Pigs can smell the chemicals that these truffles let off, and they love them. And so they will hunt them down for you out in the forest. You have to generally tie them up before they start digging up the truffles because they will dig them up and eat them if they have the chance. The thing is that something like button mushrooms and cremini mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, those we can actually grow, in a facility like we'd grow lettuce or something like that. The reason why truffles are so expensive is that these we cannot cultivate. They have to grow in the wild. Same thing if you've heard of morels. Morels don't grow in facilities like where we like to grow them, so that we can grow them in bulk. They generally will only grow out in the wild. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is a video of these fruiting bodies and how they work to release their spores.
From such apparitions as these come spores, the fungal equivalent of seeds. They're so small that they drift away like smoke. But the appearance of these spectacular constructions is brief. As soon as their spores have been shed, sometimes after only a few days, they collapse. Now they are merely food for maggots.
So fungi have beneficial relationships between themselves and other organisms. We call this a mutualism. And what we're looking at here is a picture of some leafcutter ants. They are carrying back their little sections of leaves. And in the next slide, you're actually going to watch a video that shows what they're actually doing with those leaves, because the ants don't actually eat the leaves. So what I'd like you to do on this slide, I would like you to leave a comment. I'd like you to go out, do a little research, again on the internet, on the Google, if you want, and look for another beneficial relationship between fungus and another organism. So, in your comment, you can just describe the relationship of how the fungus gets a benefit and how the organism gets a benefit out of their interaction. And so, like I said, in the next video, I'm going to show you how this relationship between ants, these leafcutter ants, and fungi work with the help of one of the zoos here in the United States.
You can see these ants in the Children's Zoo at the San Diego Zoo, and our invertebrate exhibit is called Spineless Marvels, and the leafcutter ant exhibit is the newest exhibit. Well, what you'll see in the exhibit is a simulation of what you would see in the wild, which is leafcutter ants cutting down trees practically, several hundred of them carrying leaves down into their underground nest. What you will see in our exhibit that you won't see in the wild is the underground nest, and you'll see a series of subterranean fungus chambers, and the fungus is actually what the ants eat and what they're cutting the leaves for. The leaves are used as a medium to grow the fungus on.
It's what they eat, it's what they subsist on, it's what they feed their queen. It's really cool.
Well, they're governed by no one, which is one of the most fascinating things about them. There are worker ants, which are all sterile, females, and males are only produced during times of reproduction. There's a queen, but she doesn't tell anybody what to do. She's simply the reproductive member of the colony, and in this case, with leafcutter ants, she can live 15 to 20 years and produce 300 million ants in her lifetime.
Not all relationships between fungi and organisms are beneficial. Some of them are harmful, and so we've got a negative relationship going on this picture. So what we've got our ant here, and this is the fungus. And so in the next slide, there's actually another video of how this happens. So this fungus attacking living insects and actually turning them into zombies. So that video will give you some more detail on these. These are called Cordyceps fungus. On this slide, what I'd like you to do is leave a comment. And on this one, I'd like you to do a little research on a harmful fungus. So describe the interaction between a fungus that does harm and the organism that it's harming. So describe what that fungus is and how it's harming that other organism other than this relationship that you're going to see in the video coming up next.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. spores from a parasitic fungus called Cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of Cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a Cordyceps fungus.